Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conservation Conversations. My name is Ana Sangronis, and I work for the University of Florida IFAS Extension Service. This webinar series is a joint effort between UF IFAS Extension, Florida Sea Grant, and Miami-Dade County Eco Adventures. We will be offering this webinar series every second and fourth Wednesday at 12 noon for the next few months. Thank you again for tuning in today. Everyone in this webinar is currently muted, so I ask that you type in any questions into the chat box, which will be moderated by Ed Pritchard and myself. We will answer questions at the end of the session. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out within the next week. Please follow us on social media, where we'll be advertising the monthly topics throughout the month. And if instead you'd like to receive an email reminder with the month's topics and registration links, please let us know in the chat box. Now I will turn it over to today's presenter, our very first outside guest, Mike Lloret of Florida Power and Light. And we want to thank Ed Pritchard for making this connection and bringing Mike to speak with everybody today.
Hello, so my name is Mike Lloret. Thank you very much, Anna and Ed. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the conservation of the American crocodile at FPL Turkey Point Clean Energy Center. Who am I? Again, my name is Mike Lloret. I'm a wildlife and conservation biologist and crocodile specialist for Turkey Point, which is a clean energy center in Southeast Florida. Both crocodiles and alligators live in South Florida. It's the only place in the world where we have both crocodiles and alligators coexisting. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the differences between the two. On the top, we have an American alligator, a native species that we have here, and the most common crocodilian that we have in the United States. The American alligator ranges much further north than the American crocodile because they're much more cold tolerant. American crocodiles are extremely cold intolerant, making them a lot more vulnerable. As far as some of the characteristics that sets them apart physically, if you look at the alligator, it's much darker in color. The color is often variable in the American crocodile, but it ranges anywhere from kind of an olive greenish, grayish, to a dark gray coloration, whereas the American alligator is typically a black or extremely dark gray. Now, if you look at those snout shots, you can see the American alligator has a much wider snout versus the American crocodile. It has a longer, more slender looking snout. And when you look at them both with their mouths closed, like the two pictures on the right, if you look at an alligator, you can kind of see, it almost looks like it has an overbite, and you can only see the top teeth protruding and facing down, whereas the American crocodile, they kind of fit into each other. So you can see both teeth facing up and facing down. Alligators prefer freshwater versus crocodiles that prefer more of a salty or brackish water. That doesn't mean that you won't find either of them in each other's habitats, right? We have a lot of places where their habitats overlap. You may find an American alligator that's using a coastal area just to travel from one body of water to another, right? We've seen a lot of people have seen alligators on the beach before. However, American alligators don't have salt glands, which means they can't live for a long period of time in salt water. The American crocodiles do, so they're able to live in those saltier habitats. We also have a third crocodilian species that's not mentioned here, not pictured here, but it's the spectacled caiman. It's actually introduced, so it's non-native, and it's introduced from Central and South America. It doesn't reach larger sizes of the American alligator and American crocodile, but we do have them in small populations here in South Florida as well. All right, so crocs at Turkey Point. The first crocodile was discovered at Turkey Point in 1976. The Army Corps of Engineers dug out this huge cooling canal system. 168 linear miles of cooling canals and berms, which are elevated, basically strips of land, which proved to be ideal habitat for the American crocodile. They fit in absolutely perfectly. As you can see, there's one right there at the bottom of the picture where you can see it's circled. Their camouflage is just perfect. They fit right in, and unknowingly, we kind of created an ideal American crocodile habitat. The plant's cooling canal system was built in 1974 as a secondary cooling source for the reactor. The cooling canal system offers accidental, ideal basking, nesting, and breeding habitat for the American crocs. So in the actual 168 linear miles of cooling canals, it is a saltwater environment. And we have fresher water canals and ponds all surrounding the system and within the system. And I'll talk a little bit about how important those are to the success of the crocs here as well in a couple slides. Contrary to popular belief, the crocodiles are not here for warmer water. They're actually more here for the raised nesting areas. So basically, we have these artificial berms, right? These strips of land. The females come in looking for these raised nesting areas to nest. The males come in chasing the females, and anything that's born here has the ability to stay or go as it pleases. We don't have any fences restricting the crocodiles from getting in and out of the water or crossing out of our cooling canal system into the bay, right? So they really do have the ability to go in and out, and we have crocs that live here year round. We also have crocs that come in for breeding season. Turkey Point represents one of the 3 primary nesting areas for the American croc, the other 2 being Everglades National Park and Crocodile Lake in Key Largo. There are a few other nesting sites for them as well, but those are basically the main 3. In 1979, the majority of the site was designated critical crocodile habitat. So we're really happy about that, and we've basically been monitoring the crocs here ever since. And then we get the question all the time, how many crocs do we have here on site? Well, as you can imagine, we have about 6,000 acres, and with the 168 linear miles of cooling canals and surrounding ponds and canal areas, we do have a lot of habitat for the crocs. So we estimate that we have anywhere in between 300 and 400 non-hatchling crocs using the site. Crocodile monitoring began at Turkey Point when the first nest was discovered in 1978. So basically there was a crew out there that was digging around, and they happened to hit a nest, and they said, hey, these aren't chicken eggs, right? So they called in a biologist, and the biologist identified it as an American crocodile nest. And basically the rest is history. We've been monitoring the crocs ever since, learning a tremendous amount about their biology, what they're doing here, their population growth, and basically everything there is to learn about the crocs here in South Florida. We do all sorts of seasonal work. So depending on the season will determine exactly what kind of surveys we're doing. But basically the population studies encompass location, behavior, size, age, and number of individuals. And essentially what we do is we compile all this information and put it into our database where we're able to compare growth rates or where their crocodiles may be moving to learn as much as we can about their health. So habitat preparation and creation is one of the biggest things that we do here for the crocs here at Turkey Point. It typically happens from September to December, right? So right after croc hatching season, we jump right into it. We make sure that there's no crocs that might be using that area as a nursery. And we go in and we prep the areas, right? If you remember earlier, I had mentioned that American crocodiles aren't born with salt glands. So it actually takes them a couple months for their salt glands to develop. So what does this mean? We have all these cooling canals, right, that are very salty. So where are their crocs getting the fresh water? The answer is we dig these ponds on the berms so that water can collect, the rainwater can collect in these ponds, the mother crocodiles know this, and they actually bring the babies into these ponds. Now it does two things, right? It gives ideal habitat and nursery habitat, nesting habitat for these mother crocodiles to leave their young. And it also makes, my job a little bit easier because we're kind of funneling them into the areas where we want them to be. Crocodiles are much like sea turtles. We've noticed that they prefer to go back to their historical nesting areas. So assuming we're not creating new habitat, right, just some of the maintenance that we do is go out to their historical nesting areas, and we might remove some of the greenery that might be growing in that really nutrient-rich soil. So most of our soil here and substrate that crocodiles use for incubation is extremely nutrient-rich. So when it is disturbed, it basically encourages all types of greenery growth. So that is a big job that we do here. We'll go out, we'll kind of clear the grass, till the soil, fluff up that soil to entice mama crocodile to come and deposit her eggs there year after year. Nesting and hatching season. Nesting and hatching surveys are conducted from April to August. So basically, biologist goes up and down these cooling canal system looking for any kind of croc activity, right? Tail drags, any kind of slides going up and down the bank. We have berms that are anywhere from a foot above the water level all the way up to 8 feet. And it's actually pretty incredible to see these crocodiles just scale these 8-foot berms and get right up there. We see it almost regularly here. So basically the airboat goes through 6,000 acres looking for this croc activity. And basically we investigate what's going on. Is the female coming up to nest? Is it just a crocodile that's coming up and using the pond? We also depend very much on our employees that come to work here every day. Everybody gets a wildlife training so that when they are in the field, they can report any signs of crocodile activity or wildlife activity. And we very much depend on that, considering how much land we have to cover here. One of the other things we do to survey for nests is we go out at night and see if we can catch some of the mother crocodiles using these nesting areas, and we'll kind of flag them. That way we can monitor them and see if she did in fact nest there, where we'll eventually go back and collect babies for tagging later. So here we have 3 pictures of a real wild American crocodile nest. If you look in the top top left corner, that's all we really see with a croc nest. They're cavity nesters. So much like sea turtles, they'll just open up a hole in the ground, deposit their eggs, and then cover it up with that substrate. And as you can imagine, after it rains, all those signs kind of wash away. So you really have to be on top of going out and monitoring these areas. The good news is that females will regularly go up and check on their nesting area. So it's not like we only have one shot to find it, but it can often be very, very difficult if you don't find those fresh signs to prove that there's a nest there. It is very much like finding a needle in a haystack, because even though you'll see that soil disturbed, it's very difficult to find the exact nest cavity. So that bottom left picture, you can see some eggs there that I dug up. And then on the right, a little closer look. The size of the eggs, they're just a little bit bigger than a chicken egg. Some are a little bit smaller than others. Basically, that comes down to younger, more inexperienced females versus bigger, more experienced females. And I will say that we have actually had crocodiles mound nest here twice that I've seen. So although it's not common, it does happen. So a mound nest, just like an American alligator would make, basically they pull up that soil and that debris, all that greenery, and they kind of make a little mound, deposit the eggs there so that that decaying matter incubates those eggs. So you can see, beautiful picture there, bunch of little baby crocs. That's like the best time of year, right, is when the babies start hatching. On average, American crocodiles incubate for about 3 months. So approximately 90 days, give or take, depending on how warm it is, right? And they're actually the opposite of turtles, right? So they are temperature sex determined, and males will come out of warmer nests or warmer temperatures, and females will be the result of cooler temperatures. So typically how that goes is the eggs that are closer to the surface, which by the book would be warmer, will be males, and the ones that are lower in the nest will be cooler, will be females. So this picture is one of my favorite pictures of all time, minus that one pesky blade of grass. This picture kind of encompasses everything we do for the crocodiles here at Turkey Point. You can see this is actually mama coming to excavate her nest to retrieve the babies and take them back to the water. This was taken on one of our trail cameras. So basically, when I go out and I dig up those nests or find nesting activity, I'll put a camera out there, and the camera will monitor the crocs, give us a lot better idea of what's truly going on, given that this is such a shy species. So the cameras tell a much different story. They're going 24 hours, right? So I actually have these cameras, they're on a cellular service. So if I'm at home watching TV, right, I can just get the pictures right to my phone, and I can change it from video to picture and see exactly what's going on, right? So it's very much crocs 24/7 during hatchling season. But unlike sea turtles, the babies depend on the mother to dig up the nesting cavity to retrieve them, right? So the babies will do what's called pipping, right? Well, they'll stick their little snouts out of their eggs, and they'll start making a noise, ow, 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 and they're calling their mother. Well, the mother croc basically has an internal clock that tells her when those crocs are more or less ready to hatch. And she'll actually be going up on that mound periodically to basically find out when the best time to dig up those babies is. So as soon as she starts hearing those noises, calling mama, she'll dig up the nest. And here we have this big apex predator picking up these tiny little fresh hatchlings, and some that haven't even hatched yet, full eggs, and applying gentle pressure on them and assisting them to hatch. It's an incredible phenomenon, right? We have this giant predator that has such a bad reputation. You know, when you turn on Discovery or Nat Geo and you see, you know, a big old Nile crocodile taking down a wildebeest or a saltwater crocodile taking some other large prey, often our American crocodiles get grouped in with them when they have just completely different behaviors. So our American crocs are extremely shy, and all she wants to do is pick up her babies and take them back to the water. So that substrate was actually tilled to make sure it was nice and ready for the female to nest there, entice her to come up and nest in that same historical nesting area. And if you look in the back of the picture, that's actually a pond that we dug out about 10 years ago. So it's had an opportunity to grow all that native growth around it, the buttonwoods, the mangroves, to make this really ideal nursery. And these fresh water ponds, we call them, right, collect the rainwater and are just an ideal nursery. There's fish, there's small insects, there's small crustaceans. So mama croc will come pick up those babies, take them to the water, and eventually leave them there. When a baby crocodile hatches, it is ready to rock. So it doesn't have any top behaviors, any learned behaviors. They're evolutionarily wired to survive. So as soon as that baby hatches, although it has a yolk sac that it basically, or yolk belly that it feeds off of for the first few days, that crocodile already knows what to do to hunt. And of course, if it doesn't, as nature goes, it will be picked off. And crocodiles generally have fairly large clutch sizes because when they do hatch, they're these tiny little, 9-10 inch hatchlings that unfortunately do end up food for a lot of the surrounding wildlife. So as a general rule, it's basically one hatchling crocodile from every nest might make it to adulthood. So here's a picture of a baby crocodile on the scale there. It's what regularly happens here in hatching season. So once the crocodiles hatch, We go out there, try to catch as many baby crocodiles as we possibly can at night, right? So we go out on airboats and we use headlamps, and we're looking for these tiny little glowing eyes in the water, and those glowing eyes are a reflection off the crocodile's eyes, right? And it's an amazing thing to see when you're shining in complete darkness and all of a sudden you see all these tiny little red dots, boop, 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 all over the place. That's when you know it's time to go, time to get ready to catch some baby crocodiles. So we'll catch them all that night. Our permit allows us to keep them for several days in our lab. So we have a little area where we put them up. And the reason for that is sometimes we'll go out, we'll catch 75 crocodiles in one night. To process all these crocodiles can be rather time consuming. But as a general rule, we want to get them back to the wild as quickly as we possibly can. So it's basically a 5-step process. We record all types of biometric measurements, right? Things like total length, snout to vent length, head length, tail girth. We weigh them. We determine their sex. We see if they're male or female. We mark each crocodile with a unique scoot clip number. So if you look at that little crocodile's tail, it has raised scoots on its tail, right? And there's 3 rows. So each crocodile gets a unique scoot clip number, so that if we are out in the field and we see it and we can just see the tail, we can actually identify the animal, come back to the lab, look it up, and that's basically a visual way of identifying the animal. Whereas we also put in microchips, just like you would your dog or your cat. Every crocodile gets a unique microchip number put into it or assigned to it. And every time we catch a crocodile, we scan them again, put all that information into the database. So there's a picture catching a big old croc. So we do quarterly captures every year. So we go out, we catch as many crocodiles as we can. It's typically a 2-night event, right? That'll happen again quarterly, so 4 times a year. And we'll go out and we'll try to catch as many crocodiles as we possibly can. What's different between these captures and the hatchling captures is that we'll actually process the animals right there on the shore or right there on the front of the boat. So every animal that we catch, we'll record all those measurements that I just mentioned earlier for the hatchling crocodiles, and then we'll release them right where we caught them. If they are already microchipped and are already scoot tagged, in other words, if they've already been caught before, then we just record the information and compare it to the last time we caught them. Here's some more pictures working up crocs. So these are some smaller ones. On the left, you can see they're injecting a microchip into the base of the tail. And then on the right there, we're recording some measurements. So invasive species is very much a hot topic right now. Even the general public is hearing all about them. Here on our 6,000 acres, we do have invasive species like the Argentine black and white tegu, the animal that you see in that picture sticking his tongue out. Really beautiful animals, extremely intelligent. They're omnivorous, but what really affects us here at Turkey Point is their taste for eggs. So as we know, American crocodiles lay eggs, and they could potentially impact their population. Not only the American crocodile eggs, but also the least terns that we protect here, another federally protected species, any other ground nesting bird, or eastern indigo, which is a native snake species that we have here as well. We use camera traps to keep an eye on these tegus, find out if they're moving into new areas, and we regularly trap tegus and remove them from the environment. Another very well-known invasive species is the Burmese python, which we also have here on site as well. We regularly remove those. We record measurements just like we do the crocodiles, and we share that information with other organizations that are studying them as well. So here we have the number of successful crocodile nests at Turkey Point from '78 to 2019, right? And in general, you can kind of see a general increase, right? Given a couple drop-offs, and typically the drop-offs happen after environmental factors come into play. If you look at 2010, right, there's a big drop-off from some of the best numbers we've ever had. And if you remember, 2010 is when we had a really cold winter, and American crocodiles cannot handle the cold. It severely impacts their population, stresses them out if they get too cold. Obviously, worst case scenario, it can actually kill them. But these animals will not reproduce if they're not under ideal conditions. So we see a direct correlation between health of the environment and health of the crocodile population. And then again, you see in 2015, there's another drop off. That's actually when we had a seagrass die off in our cooling canal system and a nutrient and salt spike in the system, right? So again, creating this habitat that may not be ideal or shock to the crocodile at that given time. But you can see we rebounded, right? 2018 and 2019, we increased tremendously. 2019, we had 27 nests. And right now in 2020, we are at 22 nests. And here's the number of hatchlings hatched and tagged and released back into the wild. Again, you can see the number of nests correlate pretty much directly with how many babies we're getting. And you can see this recent increase, which is great news. And here's an image that shows both successful nests and hatchlings marked and released all in the same graph. So 548 is the best we've ever done with 24 nests, which is pretty incredible. And we're shooting to get up to those numbers again. We're getting close to 365. So this is something we're really proud of. In 2007, the American crocodile's listing status improved from endangered to threatened. And FPL played a crucial role in helping this species rebound from the brink of extinction in the United States. Keeping in mind, of course, that these crocodiles have a bigger range than just the US. We are the northernmost point of their range. That's what makes their habitat so special, right? It's just this small piece of South Florida where they can live happily. They cannot handle the cold at all, which makes them so vulnerable to things like environmental disasters such as hurricanes, such as extreme cold. It could severely impact the environment, which can impact the crocodiles. So we have a poll here, if you guys don't mind answering that. Let's see.
Ed, could you please go ahead and launch that?
There we go.
Thanks, everybody. If you don't mind, just please answering these 3 questions. It'll be really quick. And make sure you scroll all the way to the bottom. And Ed, I'll let you close that out.
Sure, we'll give it a few more seconds. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and close that now.
And I think, Mike, you had one final slide.
Do I go ahead and go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So opening it up for questions.
All right. Mike, thank you so much. That was fantastic. It's now just about 12:30 on the nose, so if any of our participants have to leave, that's no problem. We will be staying on to answer questions from the chat at this time. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and a link to the broadcast will be sent out within the next week. We hope that you'll join us in 2 weeks where we will be discussing Goliath groupers. And in the meantime, please stay safe and well. If you don't have to leave, please hang on because Mike is going to turn his camera on and share a nifty surprise that he brought to add to the conversation. So Mike, if you get your camera turned on, before we take questions, I'll let you pull up what you brought to share.
All right. You all see me?
I see you.
All right. So here we have some special guests. So we actually have an American crocodile on the top and a baby American alligator here on the bottom.
Oh my God.
If you remember from the earlier slides, you can kind of see the differences even at this hatchling size of the snout, right? The alligator has a much shorter, wider snout, whereas the crocodile on the left here has a much longer, more elongated and skinnier snout. The baby coloration is a little bit different from the adult coloration in the American alligator. They kind of have these beautiful little yellowy, orangey stripes. And basically what that does is help them camouflage in the sawgrass, the habitat that they prefer to be in, right? And then you see the crocodile here. It's more of a sandy coloration that allows them to camouflage better in sandy environments, rocky environments, tangled into those mangroves, right? So one more look there. You can see the difference of the two. On the side.
Mike, I have one more request, if you don't mind. Could you please put the babies somewhere safe for a minute and
Sure.
stop sharing your screen? That will allow your video to be much larger.
Okay.
And that way our audience can really see. There we go. And that way, yeah, thanks.
There we go. So hopefully you guys can see the difference there. Luckily, we get to work with both here on site. These animals are ambassadors for their species, right? So we don't want to encourage anybody to harm, harass, touch crocodilians in the wild. That's illegal, and these animals are here to teach as ambassadors for their species. Cute little guys, but they do get big and they can get snappy.
And Mike, you're working under a permit to handle these, is that correct?
That is correct.
So don't drive home, in other words?
Correct. So
Okay.
we have both state and federal permits to handle these animals and use them for education.
Oh, that's so neat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thanks to Ed for cultivating this relationship. This is really exciting.
And thanks to Willie with Miami Eco Adventures as well. He kind of helped set this up, so we appreciate that as well.
Thanks, Willie. All right, we've got a bunch of great questions coming in for you, Mike.
Fantastic.
The first one is from Karen. Ooh, to what place are you removing pythons and tegus? Aren't they killed?
Yes, the pythons and the tegus are humanely euthanized. And we look at their stomach contents to find out what impacts they're having on our environment. And as I mentioned in the presentation, that information gets shared with other organizations and agencies that are studying these animals.
Great, thank you.
So we have a question from, let's see, Michael. Have any crocs with avid chips been detected outside PTN and Biscayne Bay?
Great question. Definitely. So crocodiles come in and out of our system all the time. And actually the best example of this and how much the crocodiles move around is actually, we had a crocodile that was originally marked here that was found all the way up in a golf course in Tampa. I will say though, Tampa historically gets too cold to sustain a crocodile population. right? So probably wasn't a good idea for that croc to be all the way up there in the cooler months, but it made its way up there. So
Awesome. Next question is from Cindy, who wants to know, can tegus be eaten?
can tegus be eaten? I know that people have eaten them, and I've eaten a lot of invasive species before, but I haven't tried tegu yet. But I'm all for using these animals for any positive use, right? Whether it's skins, whether it's commercially for meat, right? Giving a second use to an invasive species after we remove them from the environment from an unfortunate situation is always a good thing.
Have you noticed any predation by any other animals within South Florida on the tegu?
Any predation? I can't say that I've seen it myself with my own eyes, but just knowing, our wildlife, I'm sure a lot of the babies get picked off by our birds, right? Our wading birds, things like egrets, herons, our birds of prey, right? I'm sure we'll pick off some tegus, but once they get some size on them, you're talking about a large-bodied animal that's extremely intelligent, that really is hard for a lot of our native species to prey on. And something else I failed to mention in the presentation, what makes them different is that they actually brumate, which is kind of like hibernation for reptiles. They can actually go underground for our winter months, and they can survive colder weather. So this makes them much more of a threat moving north compared to, let's say, the Burmese python, which is a lot less cold tolerant.
Right. Thanks. Let's go to Herman for the next question. So he says, I guess with humans, which either the alligator or the crocodile is more aggressive in South Florida, if you were to talk about aggression towards humans?
So I guess statistically speaking, the American alligator has a lot more interactions with humans than the American crocodile. I believe there's only one registered attack on people in the United States from American croc. That was somebody that was swimming in the middle of the night. The croc bit them, realized they weren't prey, and swam off. Whereas alligators, you hear about it a little bit more often. But species aside, it's usually human error that makes these things happen, right? Whether crocs or alligators, crocodilians are coming up to fish cleaning stations and people are feeding them fish scraps, right? Or people purposely feeding them. These animals become conditioned to come up to humans for food. We're talking about highly intelligent animals. Once they get one handout, they're going to keep coming back for more. And that puts people in a bad situation. So if I was feeding them, which again is illegal, I know what I'm doing and I'm looking at the animal, but the next person that comes to the water, right, may not know that that animal's there, and they may run into an issue when that crocodilian comes up for food. And then also people swimming at dawn and dusk in waters where crocodilians are present. So you follow a couple simple rules, you really won't have any issues with any species of crocodilian, especially here in the US.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael would like to know, he's mentioned that he's seen crocs as large as 12 to 14 feet over at Cape Sable. Can you tell us what the average length for males and females are in Southeast Florida or South Florida?
So I would say in general, you're talking about males, larger males will be about 12 feet or so, and females about 8.5 feet. But we're talking about a species that if we go to Costa Rica, right, into Central America, get a lot larger. They reach a lot larger sizes. So we're talking about males that are reaching 14, 15 feet, sometimes even larger. But in general, ours don't get as large as those.
Cool. Ed, do you have the next question?
Yeah, so Willie says, what can the common person do to help American crocodiles here in South Florida?
It's a great question. Education is number one, right? Know what's around you. it happens fairly regularly to hear that I hear basically, oh, I didn't know we had crocodiles. So just knowing that they're here is half the battle. Sharing that with people. I often give the example, there's some people, let's say in the Keys, that their property value goes up when they have crocodiles because they're so excited to have them, right? They say, oh yeah, that's a big bruiser, he's always at the end of the canal. And those are the people I really love to interact with and talk to, because they have come into the habitat of the crocodile, embraced it, and learned how to live around them, right? And they often share that information with anybody that goes by. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, you may have somebody that may not know about the animal, right? They see this large crocodilian out basking on a bank, right, a 12-foot animal, and they say, oh no, this animal is going to come after us, right? Well, education is half the battle. Understanding that statistically speaking, we are not prey for these animals, and then not putting yourself or any of your pets in a situation where they will become prey will eliminate any crocodilian issues. So I would say the main thing is just education. Inform yourselves, read up as much as you can, understand what's going on out there. And then just like what you would do for any other wildlife, right? No polluting, being more energy efficient, all of these indirectly and directly help the American crocodile.
Excellent. Karen wants to know if you also do conservation work with birds.
Well, here on site, I'm very lucky where we have all types of visitors, right? So I don't have any specific projects with birds, but I try to collaborate with anybody that needs information that might be studying them, right? So if I have, our pair of great horned owls that are living on site, and the researcher's looking for owl pellets, right? I'll go ahead and I'll go out, I'll collect them, I'll share that with them. So it's kind of a network of a bunch of people that are interested in learning as much as we can about these animals.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. Next up, we would like to hear from Judy. She says, do crocs or alligators eat iguanas?
Awesome question. There's some really cool pictures out there of both crocs and alligators eating iguanas. In general, though, crocs and alligators are more active at dawn, dusk, and nighttime. And that's typically when the iguanas are sleeping either in the trees or in their burrows. So there is kind of a conflict there where their most active times don't overlap. However, crocodilians are very opportunistic. If they were to come across an iguana, as we've seen in a lot of those pictures, they would absolutely go for them. And if that crocodilian happens to be hunting during the day, they will absolutely take an iguana.
Cool.
That'd be a nice biocontrol.
Absolutely.
And Michael is following up with another question asking if we see crocs in Biscayne Bay or any of the local canals, is there a reporting process that we should follow? And by the way, there is a caiman in the canal behind the falls.
If the croc is just there, our numbers are stable now. You can report it to FWC if you'd like, but essentially they're pretty much only going to react if that animal is in a situation where it's going to get hurt or it could hurt somebody. But the agency that you would contact for anything that has to do with crocodilians in Florida would be Florida Fish and Wildlife.
Great.
All right.
All right, wonderful. And Barbara says, you have great horned owls? Awesome.
We do.
Yeah, that's great. Mike, I have a question for you. In terms of climate change, what kind of impacts are you seeing to, this population that you have here at the plant?
That's a phenomenal question and super fascinating to learn about. So when you talk about the American croc, you're talking about a coastal species here in South Florida, right? So, before Turkey Point was here, the crocs very much dependent on these coastal areas for nesting. If we're talking about things like sea level rise that might be flooding their historical nesting areas, places like Turkey Point will play a critical role in crocodile success in the future, because we have the ability to modify our land, whereas that might be more difficult in a national park, right? So if we want to dig ponds, we can dig ponds if we know that's in the best interest of the animals. If we need to raise the level of the berms, if the water level is getting higher, we can, if that's in the best interest of the animals. So it kind of gives us an interesting approach to be able to modify habitat with the changes that are coming. What else in regards to climate change? So we got sea level rise, then we're talking about, right, heat. If it's extremely hot, you're gonna have all the crocodiles coming out, males, right? So again, making those areas higher, giving them more substrate to nest in, giving them more options to nest in ideal areas will give these mothers an opportunity to put their eggs in a place to succeed. So that's two big projects to consider when thinking about climate change.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, so we have another question in the chat from Cindy. What would happen if the soil was not reworked?
Another great question. So we have some areas where they don't grow new greenery as quickly, whereas others we have, basically anytime you disturb the surface, it just explodes with growth. I mean, the soil that we're working with is extremely nutrient rich. It's a mixture of, sand, soil, peat, marl, moss, all that. Anybody that knows incubation substrates goes crazy when they see our soil. I mean, it sounds crazy to talk about, but it's true. It's really great stuff. The downside to it is that it grows all this greenery, right? So it's not something that we have to do, clearing these areas, but it does two things for us, right? It allows that mother crocodile to come to the historical nesting area year after year where she wants to be. And then it makes, let's say, my job a little bit easier as a biologist, because I'm kind of funneling her where I want her to go, right? So I have a better chance at monitoring her. I have a better chance at understanding where she's taking her babies so that I can collect them for processing. But if we didn't do that, they have 6,000 acres here, 168 linear miles of cooling canals to deposit their eggs. So they'll certainly find a spot without question. It's just kind of part of our program to help the crocs and help ourselves as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Cindy. Any other questions? I see Barbara made a comment here. This is great. This is a great series for teachers, lunch and learn with conservation conversations, teachers and their students. I think that's a great suggestion. So, we do these every second and fourth Wednesday. It would be great, if you guys had enjoyed this presentation today, definitely share it with anyone who you think would benefit. We're also going to send a link to this presentation, so it'd be a great opportunity for those that didn't get to tune in today to kind of check this out.
All right. Well said, Ed. Thanks for that extra mention there. And yeah, we want to thank Michael again. We know this was a lot, and we really appreciate you coming out here and putting up with the dress rehearsal and all of the preparation behind this. But I think that all of the participants really got a lot from your presentation. So we're very grateful to you being a part of this, and we hope we can do it again in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Any opportunity I have to kind of talk about these big, beautiful creatures, I try to take advantage of. So thank you for having me and giving me the platform to talk about them.
All right.
All right. And thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you guys on our next talk, which will be in a couple weeks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.